I'm Summer.
And I'm Mike.
And we got married.
With children.
We're married 2 years now.
Blended for 11.
Like a margarita.
Yeah, baby, like a margarita.
And you're listening to the Everything Always podcast.
Want to tell them why we do this?
We do this because blending families isn't easy. There's step-parenting, co-parenting, his ex.
Her ex.
Schedules, sibling rivalry.
Money issues.
Custody issues.
Dating and relationship issues.
It's a whole lot of stuff.
Blended with a whole lot of good stuff.
And we're here to talk about all of it because we've done most of it.
We might not be experts, but we've learned a lot.
And we're still learning, and we want to share that with you.
Thanks for joining. Now let's go.
Hello, hello. Welcome to another Everything Always podcast episode. Yeah, it's just me again. Sorry to break the bad news. Mike will be back, I promise. We've just had a lot of things going on, and I'm going to let him share that with me on our next episode. So let's dive into today's. Last week, we talked about what you can do to get through the tension of different parenting styles. And I said that this week, we would actually talk about some common parenting styles that there are. Based on some research, I am such a fact finder. Like, I love looking. If you know Colby, if you do any of those personality tests, that's something that I was pretty strong in. I like to find the facts behind things that I've heard and like do the research. So that's where we're at. You're going to hear what I discovered. It goes without saying that everyone is going to be different in terms of how they approach parenting. It usually stems from parenting in their culture, their upbringing, their age, it's their religion, and maybe it's expectations from other family members or society. And we also know that this parenting stuff can get pretty complicated for step parents because there are even more things that are involved, outside influences, including people. There's so many things that have led to the point of you becoming a blended family or becoming a step parent, and all of those influence how you're going to parent in this new home environment. So I did some research to not only see what the common parenting styles were and their characteristics, but I also wanted to learn about what type of parenting style was proven to have the best outcomes for children in blended families and ultimately the relationship between the parents. And so some of this research comes from a psychologist named Diana Baumrind. I don't know if I'm saying it, Baumrind. It's one of those. But she identified 3 classic styles of parenting. Now, please note, I'm really talking about discipline styles. I'm not talking about attachment style parenting or those type things. I'm really just thinking about parenting styles in terms of discipline. And if you think about your parenting style, or you think about somebody else's, perhaps your spouse or your ex, it probably falls into one of these 3 categories. So the first one is permissive parenting. And this is when parents resist setting rules and they choose to have their children just oversee themselves. It's kind of like the do whatever mentality, do whatever you want type of parenting. The second one is the authoritarian parents and parenting. And those are parents who demand good behavior and conformity from their kids. They will use shame and really harsh consequences and punishment to make sure that their kids are doing what they say. And then this third one is authoritative parenting. And these are parents that create rules and responsibilities for their children and enforce these standards, but they're doing this while communicating to them with care and respect. So think about those and think of where you fall. I'll go into a little bit more detail on those, but I think it'll be really interesting to see where you fall. So for Patricia Papernow, claims that the best outcomes for children have come from parents who practice the authoritative parenting style. It's actually proven to be successful in all types of families, not just, those that are divorced, but it is especially successful in step families. And it's proven to be effective when it comes to mental health of the child, emotional maturity, academic performance, social competence, and just overall behavior. And even further research showed that the other styles, the permissive and the authoritarian, actually lead to problems in those same areas. Here's what I really found to be interesting is that paper now said that when it comes to step families, it's common to see step parents pulled towards the authoritarian style, which is super firm. It's almost hostile. And the reason is because they seek control and they want order. And what can happen is the bio parents want to protect their kids, and they'll slide into this permissive style parenting. And it's almost as if being in this type of dynamic pushes the parents into a style that they may not have started out with. I thought that was so interesting. And it's kind of like this. So think of like bio parents seeing their child talking really loudly about something they're all fired up about. Like they're being like super, super loud. Maybe they're interrupting you or something. And they might even throw in some sarcasm and they think they're being funny. A step parent might say, that's unacceptable and uncontrollable behavior. You're being obnoxious, you're this, you're that, whatever. They want to dish out a consequence. Whereas the bio parent could see their child as just being excited or speaking up for what they believe in. That's another thing. They could be speaking up for something and the bio parent will be like, oh, no, Sally's just really talking about what she believes in. And the step parent might say, no, she's totally speaking out of line. So it's things like that that kind of force you into these different roles because you see those kids differently. And I talked about this in the last episode, you know all of these sides to your children, but in those beginning years when somebody else is just meeting that child, they don't know all of that yet. It's like, I don't know, that's just bad behavior. And so it can definitely start to push you into that, you need to discipline your child more. And likewise, it could also make you as a bio parent become more permissive because you are thinking that you want to protect your child. So all of this stuff was very, very interesting. There were some things that I totally related to, whether it was me personally, whether it was what I've seen in our family, whether it was just even just short moments of having feelings. But yeah, it was just so interesting to me because I'm like, I've felt times where I've probably been in that permissive mode. I've also felt like, oh my gosh, I want to dish out this hard consequence. Like I could totally relate to those feelings and how, especially in a step family, you could feel that way as a step parent or a bio parent. So I really wanted to share this today because I wanted to raise the question in your mind of what these most popular styles are and how you see yourself. And also, to really understand why one or the other might happen and ask ourselves, what are we doing? And do we like the results we're seeing? Where am I falling on this spectrum here? And most importantly, could you consider a style of parenting that is more authoritative and does help support healthy kids? Hey guys, guess what? We have a new website where you can see all of our podcasts and get easy access to the show notes, everything we talk about on the episodes, and you can even listen to the podcast directly from the site. You can contact us through the site and share your thoughts and questions. Check it out at www.everythingalways.co. That's www.everythingalways.co.
And you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at everythingalwaysco. We just set it up and we'll be sure to put important announcements there.
And we love that this podcast has been so helpful to so many, and our hope is to share it with even more. So can you help us? Will you take a moment now or after the episode to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, and share it? It would mean the world to us, and it helps us to keep bringing you the best content.
Come on, we appreciate you guys. So what do you say, baby? Back to the episode?
Back to the episode. So let me go in a little bit deeper on authoritative parenting for those of you that may have never heard of it. And of course, this is an opinion. It is based on research, but it's also based on our own outcomes that we have realized this was the style that we were practicing without really knowing too much about it. But it was it was something that we had come together on. You might be thinking, what's so great about authoritative parenting? And why is it so great for step families? So we know, as I talked about on the last episode, that discipline can be super tricky and it causes lots of tension for step parents, especially in those first few years of blending. And what I learned during this research actually reinforced something that Mike and I came to a decision of that we've talked about before, is that in those early years, when you are first coming together and you are blending, it is best for the biological parent to be the main disciplinarian to their child. And we have talked a lot about this. We talked a lot about this because we've been there and we've tried the different ways. And the lessons learned and the expectations of each other that we'd been through, then researching this stuff, like it all made me go, okay, what is the right way? Let me seek out some experts to determine how do we handle these situations. And that's how we determined during a certain amount of time or until we reach this level of relationship, who's going to be the disciplinarian for their bio kids. And it really did help, because then you have a chance to develop that connection as a step parent with stepchild. And that's when they are ready to accept you as an authority figure. And that's when you really start to see success. When it comes too soon, you can do some damaging things. So when it comes to having a style as a step parent, we found that being kind, being approachable, and also being firm works really well. It's about how you're being firm. So you're being firm in order to get that respect. So it's not necessarily I'm dishing out a really hard punishment or consequence. It's really about I'm going to back up your disciplinarian and I am going to be firm. Because what you don't want to happen is you don't want to get taken advantage of because you're not the rule enforcer. And this was another lesson that Mike and I had to learn. There were definitely times, especially me, mostly talking about me, when it was like, oh, Summer loves us and she'll buy us. If we ask her for something, she'll buy it first. If we ask her if we want to go to this friend's house, she'll say yes. Or if I want to go do this dangerous thing or whatever it is that my mom or dad might not let me do, well, Summer, she'll let us have the whole entire pint of ice cream. And you know what? There were times it was true. I was like, okay, I was so nervous about them not liking me and so badly wanting to form that connection that I probably did let them do a lot more things, kind of like an auntie would. But what can happen from that is lack of respect. And it's not something that's their fault or because they're misbehaved kids. No, it's really up to the adults to have them earn that respect, because every child naturally selfish and looking out for themselves. And they're going to ask for what they want. That is part of their job as a kid. And it's up to us to create the boundaries and the rules and the standards for them. So we had to learn that. And, I kind of want to say the hard way, not necessarily. Some things were, yes, the hard way. Some things were just, we just learned that didn't work and it was a blessing. And then we figured out how to do it differently. But what I think is important to understand is, where people were before you all came together. Parents and their children had a way that they did things in their home, and they had their years or however long to really develop and agree on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable behavior in their home. And so then you bring in other people, and it's kind of like, oh, well, I see your kids doing something that I find unacceptable. And the other person might be like, yeah, that really wasn't a big deal in our home. And then boom, you've got tension. And here's a big reason why that tension happens a lot, especially for the step parents, because step parents are doing a lot now for more kids. And they're doing things like cooking and driving, and they're contributing financially. And in those early years, and sometimes for many, many years, they're often not getting acknowledged for it. And when you're not acknowledged or appreciated, you feel resentment. And that resentment is the thing that can lead the parent to get upset with the children and take it out on them. And from that feeling of, being out of control and not feeling appreciated, that's where that authoritarian style of parenting can creep in, because it's a feeling of, oh, now I can be in control. I can control you all. But again, it's, as I read before, it's not an ideal, at least in our opinion, style of parenting. When parents have the authoritative parenting style, then they're able to work with their partner to set clear rules and have realistic expectations. And if you can share that common goal of raising healthy, capable, productive, and well-behaved kids, like if you're like, this is our goal, and we know that we agree on this together, let's figure out our standards in this family and figure out how we can get there through clear, consistent consequences that are directly related to their behavior. So if you do this, this is the consequence, but you're communicating it to them in a very fair way. It's teaching them a lesson. It's not just this dictative way of being. The thing is, this stuff is going to happen. It's always going to happen. Just because you practice this style of parenting doesn't mean that your kids are going to be super well behaved. Doesn't mean that they're going to go through their teen years being the most polite person you've ever met. It's not that way. Everyone's still human and going through things. The thing is, though, is the stronger you are by having a foundation and having something that you're both working off of and that you've compromised on, like I talked about in the last episode, the more that you have those things in place, you are so much stronger and better equipped to deal with it when those things arise. And it's like in our episode when we talked about fighting and how that can actually be an opportunity in your relationship. You are going to fight. No two people always 100% of the time see things the same way. And if they do, then somebody's lying. I mean, it's just like natural. Like you're going to think of things differently. You're going to have a different opinion. You're going to say, I wouldn't have done it that way. And that's okay. But as long as you have that foundation of where you want to be, what you can compromise on, how you can maturely talk through it, you know that you have a system in place that can deal with those hard things when they happen. So when your teenage son does take your car out at 3 a.m. in the morning, no, that hasn't happened to us, but I'm just saying when that might happen, you guys are on the same page of how you're going to dish that consequence and what's going to happen. And there's nothing like a good solid foundation to work from. That was just a little review on what those parenting styles are. And I thought what would be really interesting is to go further into consequences on our next episode. Because some people are like, okay, so these two parenting styles have consequences. How do you differentiate which is harsh and which is hostile and which is actually helping the child learn a lesson? And I think that's those are really great questions. And we're going to talk about those. And of course, everything we talk about here is how we do things, how we are learning to do things still, and what's worked for us, what hasn't. But I can't not share it with you. We both want to share it with you, especially when we see things that have worked so well and we feel so grateful for it. And we know that people struggle with these issues. This one's a big one. This one is a big one. You really, really want to be on the same page as your partner, and it's not always possible, and it's harder. But you can get pretty close. You can get pretty darn close. So I hope these tips are really helpful. I hope you learned something. Maybe you knew about all these parenting styles before. I don't know. I didn't know. I knew there were different types of parenting styles. I've heard of maybe 50 different types. I think people are consistently inventing their own as well. But this really broke it down into the most common things that are seen when blended families come together. And also the very common reason that there is that tension. So look it up, do your own research on authoritative parenting, or just think about it. It is pretty simple. You have consequences, you have standards, and there are consequences for when, somebody's out of line or breaks a rule. It's about what are those consequences? And really what it's about is, are you disciplining with care and with love and with respect so that they understand why this is happening. They're not just being told because I said so. I think it's awesome. I think a lot of the things that we have learned and have implemented are pretty much this style. And it's been super helpful for us. And I hope that if you are, and I don't hope that you're struggling with this, but I hope that if you are, you'll think about this and you'll talk to your partner about it too. Thanks for listening, guys. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Our goal is to bring you all kinds of value that will help you navigate these challenging waters of blending a family.
Reach out to us if there's something specific you want to hear.
And don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.
And if you really like it, share with someone you love.
Ooh, and be bold enough to share it with someone you don't.